Charlie, my pitbull with his big, innocent puppy eyes, was the sweetest dog anyone could ask for. He might look tough, but he wouldn't hurt a fly. My neighbor, Mr. Stevens, however, wasn't convinced. He was an uptight, bitter man in his 60s, always glaring at us from his front porch. For months, he'd complained about Charlie's occasional barking, even though it was rare. I tried to keep the peace, but things took a dark turn when I found something in Charlie's food bowl. I checked Charlie's food bowl and found small, unfamiliar green pellets mixed with his kibble. My breath caught. Where on earth did those come from? I picked one up, feeling its odd texture and unsure of its purpose. It wasn't food, that much was obvious. My heart started racing as I turned my attention to Charlie, hoping these pellets were somehow harmless. But deep down, I feared the worst was yet to come. Panic set in as I rushed to Charlie's side, noticing his unusual lethargy. "Charlie, buddy, what's wrong?" I whispered, my voice trembling. He didn't wag his tail or lift his head. He just lay there, eyes half open, struggling to focus. My mind raced through possibilities, but the sight of those green pellets haunted me. Could it be? Was someone actually trying to hurt my dog? Fear gripped me tighter as I assessed the situation. I prayed the pellets weren't fatal or some type of poison and quickly gathered Charlie into the car. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys, the severity of the situation sinking in. Whoever had done this was beyond cruel, and my sweet Charlie didn't deserve any of it. I glanced back at my house, then sped off, determined to save him. Every second felt like a lifetime as I navigated through traffic, my grip white-knuckled on the steering wheel. With my heart pounding, I drove swiftly to the emergency vet. Charlie lay in the back seat, breathing shallowly, barely moving. The streets seemed endless, the stoplights longer than ever before. "Hang in there, Charlie. Just a little more," I muttered, trying to stay calm. Every turn seemed to blur as my desperation grew. Finally, the clinic came into view and I pulled into the parking lot with a screech. I flung the door open and raced inside. I arrived at the clinic and begged the vet to save Charlie. "Please, I think my dog has been poisoned. You have to help him," I shouted out of breath. The vet, a kind-faced woman with swift hands, immediately took Charlie from me and disappeared into the examination room. I stood there, feeling helpless and frantic. The waiting area was a blur of sterile white walls and murmured conversations, but all I could focus on was my hope for Charlie's survival. The vet worked quickly, performing tests and inducing vomiting to clear Charlie's stomach. I watched through the glass door, muscles tense as the minutes ticked by. Occasionally, the vet would glance up and give a brief nod, signaling that they were doing all they could. Finally, after what felt like hours, they gave Charlie an IV to rehydrate him. The relief on the vet's face was slight but present, giving me a glimmer of hope. Meanwhile, I paced the waiting room, trying to keep my composure. Each step seemed to echo the rapid beating of my heart. The other pet owners glanced at me sympathetically, but I couldn't meet their eyes. I muttered under my breath, chewing on my nails, a bad habit revisited under stress. The clock on the wall seemed to slow down, and every passing second felt like an eternity. Charlie's fate was out of my hands. The vet finally emerged, revealing that Charlie had been poisoned but would recover with proper treatment. "It was touch and go for a bit, but he's a strong dog," she said, giving me a reassuring smile. Relief washed over me and I exhaled deeply. Thank you so much," I stammered, tears welling up. But then, a new emotion surfaced. Anger. Someone had done this deliberately, and I was ready to find out who. Relieved and enraged, I listened as the vet explained the severity of the situation. "This kind of poison isn't something a dog can come across accidentally," she began. My blood boiled as she spoke. The vet's words echoed in my head, deliberate, intentional. "We'll need to keep him overnight for observation, but he should be fine to go home tomorrow," she added. I nodded, a storm brewing inside me. Someone wanted to harm Charlie, and I had a pretty good idea who. My stomach twisted as I realized Charlie wasn't coming home with me tonight. The vet insisted he needed to stay for observation to make sure the poison was fully out of his system. It was the right decision, but it didn't make it any easier. Watching him through the window, lying there with his big, trusting eyes barely open, shattered me. He didn't understand why I was leaving without him, and that made it hurt even more. "Hang in there, buddy," I whispered, fighting back tears. Leaving him behind was harder than I expected, but one thing was clear. I was going to find out who did this. I drove home in silence, the empty seat beside me a constant reminder of Charlie's absence. The house felt eerily quiet without his familiar presence greeting me at the door. I tossed my keys on the counter and sank into the couch, my mind racing. Who could have done this? Who hated Charlie enough to try and poison him? I struggled with who might have done this, but kept coming back to Mr. Stevens. That old grump always had it out for Charlie. His complaints were constant, but I never imagined it would come to this. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was involved. With no concrete evidence, I knew it was just a hunch, but it was a starting point, and I needed one. I picked up Charlie from the vet, relief flooding me as his tail wagged weakly. On the way home, I couldn't stop thinking about Mr. Stevens, his complaints, glares, and constant rants about Charlie. My suspicion grew with each memory. I pulled into a drive-through, getting Charlie a puppy cone as a treat. Watching him enjoy it, I knew I couldn't let this go. Stevens was my prime suspect, but I needed proof. Deciding to take action, I gathered photographic evidence of the pellets found in Charlie's bowl. Using my phone, I took clear pictures, making sure every angle was captured. I also kept a few of the pellets in a sealed bag as evidence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how serious this was. If Mr. Stevens was behind this, he needed to be stopped. I prepared to confront Mr. Stevens, but wanted to calm down first. My emotions were all over the place, and I needed to approach this rationally. Taking deep breaths, I paced my living room. "Calm yourself, Alex," I muttered. This confrontation needed to be handled smartly. No point in going off half-cocked. I needed facts and control, not just raw anger. Tomorrow, I would face him. I spent the night researching poisons and talking with a close friend for advice. Pulling up articles online, I delved into every detail about the pellets I found. Meanwhile, texting Lisa, one of my closest friends, helped clear my mind. "This is serious," she replied. "Make sure you have all your ducks in a row before confronting him." Her support bolstered my resolve. I was ready. Determined, I decided to confront Stevens head-on the next morning. The sun barely peeked over the horizon as I sipped my coffee, going over everything in my head one last time. Charlie was still asleep, his slow breathing a soothing reminder of why I was doing this. Gathering the evidence, I took a deep breath and set out. Today, I would get some answers, one way or another. Early the next day, I marched to Mr. Stevens' front door and pounded on it. My fists hit harder with each knock. Moments later, the door creaked open. Mr. Stevens stood there, looking more annoyed than surprised. "What do you want?" he huffed. I steeled myself. "We need to talk, now," I demanded. Today, there would be no beating around the bush. He was going to hear me out. Stevens opened the door, trying to act nonchalant, but I could see right through him. His faux innocent expression didn't fool me. "You poisoned Charlie," I accused. His eyes flickered for a split second before narrowing. "Don't be ridiculous," he scoffed, but I saw a hint of panic. "Look at these," I said, showing the photos of the pellets. He glared back defiantly, but I knew I was onto something. I directly accused him of poisoning Charlie and presented the evidence found in the bowl. "These pellets were in Charlie's food," I stated, holding up the photos. Mr. Stevens' face hardened and his eyes flickered momentarily. "Don't be absurd," he retorted, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. "How do you explain this then?" I pressed on, determined to make him admit to his cruel act. Mr. Stevens denied it vehemently, scoffing and rolling his eyes. "You're imagining things," he sneered. "Why would I waste my time on your mutt?" His tone was filled with arrogance, but I saw a hint of fear in his eyes. "This is serious, Mr. Stevens," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Someone tried to poison Charlie, and the evidence points to you." He even made a few snide remarks about how noisy Charlie was. "Maybe if you kept that dog quiet, none of this would have happened," he said, a smirk playing on his lips. My blood boiled at his audacity. "Charlie barely barks," I countered, fists clenched at my sides. "You've been after him for months. Everyone knows it." His smug expression only fueled my anger more. Furious but composed, I left, knowing this wasn't over. Turning on my heel, I walked away, my heart pounding in my chest. I could feel Mr. Stevens' eyes boring into my back, but I didn't look back. This isn't the end, I thought to myself. Charlie needed justice, and I wasn't going to stop until I got to the bottom of this. Mr. Stevens would pay for what he did. Upon returning home, I decided to document every incident involving Mr. Stevens for future reference. I sat down at my kitchen table, pulling out a notebook and writing down every detail I could remember. Each glare, each harsh word, and each snide remark went into that notebook. This was war now, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. Every piece of evidence would help. I installed security cameras and kept a detailed journal of interactions with my neighbour. Positioning the cameras to cover my property, I hoped they'd catch anything suspicious. My journal filled up quickly as I recorded each encounter with Mr. Stevens. It became my routine, checking the footage, writing down notes, and staying alert. I was leaving no stone unturned in my quest to protect Charlie. Days went by without incident, but I constantly felt on edge and couldn't leave Charlie unsupervised. Every noise outside made me jump. Every bark from Charlie had my heart racing. Sleep was a luxury I could no longer afford. Keeping watch became my new normal. Charlie stayed by my side at all times, his innocent eyes not knowing the extent of the danger that lurked. The cameras captured Mr. Stevens glaring or lurking around the fence, but nothing incriminating. Each day, I reviewed the footage, hoping for a slip-up, something tangible to take action on. But all I got were cold stares and unsettling appearances. It was frustrating, to say the least. Stevens was careful, perhaps more than I anticipated, but I wasn't giving up just yet. Frustrated yet determined, I decided to revisit the vet. I needed more concrete evidence, something undeniably pointing to the poisoning. Explaining the situation to the vet, I asked if there was any detailed report on the poison found in Charlie's system. Maybe knowing more about it would help build my case against Mr. Stevens. The vet agreed to assist, providing me with a comprehensive report. I got a medical report on the poison to bolster my evidence. The vet explained the specific chemicals found in Charlie's system, noting how they matched certain pesticides. It was a type used in garden maintenance, which narrowed down possibilities. Armed with this information, my resolve grew stronger. Stevens used poison, but now I confirmed it wasn't just a wild accusation. It was a fact. Armed with the vet's report, I considered going to the police but worried about the lack of concrete proof. The report detailed the specific chemicals aligning with pesticides, yet it wasn't enough. Doubts nagged at me. What if they brushed it off as circumstantial evidence? My mind raced with possible scenarios where Stevens would deny everything. Doing nothing wasn't an option, though. I needed to bolster my case further. I revisited the pellets, trying to identify their exact composition through online research. Sitting at my kitchen table, I spread out the photos and the vet report, cross-referencing them with articles. Each match felt like a tiny victory, painting a horrifically clear picture. The internet was a maze, but I was determined. Finding descriptions and images that confirmed my suspicions reinforced the idea that the pellets were indeed harmful pesticides. This led me to a garden supply store where I found a match with a lethal pesticide. Walking through the aisles, I scrutinized each product, feeling a sense of approaching doom. When I saw the familiar green pellets in one of the bags, my heart sank. Holding the bag, I read the label, confirming my fears. This was the same substance, no doubt about it. I had to be sure though, so I bought a small bag. To prove this, I bought some and noted its unique properties. At home, I carefully examined the pellets, comparing their texture, color, and smell with the ones I found in Charlie's bowl. They were identical. Taking photos of the store-bought version for further comparison, I felt a cold resolve settle in. This matching material was a piece of the puzzle, but I needed more before confronting anyone officially. I planned to cross-reference it with any substances found on Mr. Stevens's property. My next step was risky but essential. Any direct connection to his garden upheld my case stronger than just comparisons. Already agitated, Stevens would notice anything unusual. I had to be discreet. As I devised my plan, the reality of this dangerous game struck me. But for Charlie, there was no holding back. Meanwhile, tension continued to build, and Charlie remained my top priority. Daily walks were shorter under my careful eye. At nights, my dreams replayed worst-case scenarios. Stevens became an omnipresent threat, lurking just outside my view. Each interaction heightened the stakes. Watching Charlie recover slowly made each passing day feel like a countdown. My heart ached for peace, but I owed him justice first. Not wanting to alert Mr. Stevens, I began subtle surveillance of his property. From my window and yard, I watched his routine. Early mornings and late evenings, when he believed no one noticed, I tracked his movements. My phone's camera became my best ally, snapping quick photos and videos. I knew it was a long shot, but any valid link between him and the pellets could break his facade. I noticed Stevens applied the same green pellets on his lawn and garden. Late afternoon, I watched from my window, hidden behind the curtains. His yard care seemed innocent enough, but the telltale green specks strung a nerve. Each night, Stevens would spread pellets in small quantities around his flower beds. It reinforced my suspicions, bringing me one step closer to connecting all dots directly. Cautiously, I collected some of these and compared them with the ones from Charlie's bowl. Deciding it had to be done at night, I sneaked over to his garden, gloves on, a small plastic bag ready. Under the cover of darkness, I gathered the samples, heart pounding with every noise. Once home, I set the newly collected pellets beside the originals. The similarities in appearance and smell were undeniable. The similarities were unmistakable. Each pellet matched precisely in color, size, and texture. Photographing both sets side by side, I felt a grim satisfaction. This was it, at least a substantial piece of the puzzle. Now, I had more than just a hunch. With this evidence, I inched closer to the truth. It wasn't over, but confirming my suspicions threw fuel on my fiery sense of justice. Now, feeling more confident, I decided it was time to make Mr. Stevens sweat a bit. He thought he could get away with poisoning Charlie, but things were about to change. I needed to be strategic, getting into his head without direct confrontation. It was a game of wits now, and I wasn't going to lose. The seed of my plan was already sprouting, turning the neighborhood against him subtly and effectively. I spread a rumor around the neighborhood about someone poisoning pets, subtly implying suspicion on Stevens. During casual conversations, I mentioned my concerns about someone using dangerous chemicals. "You know, Charlie was poisoned recently. We need to be careful," I'd say, emphasizing the danger. The reactions were immediate, raised eyebrows, concerned whispers. People knew Stevens had issues with pets, and my pointed remarks nudged them towards him. The rumor mill started churning. The rumor spread quickly, turning neighbors against Mr. Stevens and making him increasingly paranoid. Conversations at the local store, at evening walks, everyone was talking about the mysterious pet poisoner. Stevens, catching wind of the gossip, began sensing the cold shoulders and suspicious glances. His face grew more sullen at each interaction, paranoia etched deeper into his features. Watching this reaction brought me one step closer to justice. I watched as Stevens became more irate and isolated, confronting neighbors who now shunned him. From my window, I saw him approach Mrs. Parker, normally friendly, but now wary. "Heard what they're saying," he'd bark, receiving curt nods in response. His increasing frustration was almost palpable, a stark contrast to his previous arrogance. The more isolated he became, the more mistakes he might make. It was working better than I imagined. I set traps, leaving harmless, booby-trapped dog toys around strategically to catch Stevens in the act. Nestled in corners of my yard and near the fence, they were equipped with tiny hidden cameras. Each toy was designed to record any tampering, ensuring no movement would go unnoticed. It felt like a military operation, each step calculated with precision. My aim? To catch him red-handed, leaving no room for denial. One evening, I caught Stevens on camera approaching my yard with a suspicious package. Reviewing the footage, there he was, sneaking up to my fence, looking around nervously. My heart pounded as he leaned over, placing something amongst the bushes. I zoomed in, watching his every move. This could be the proof I needed. Just as I thought I had him, though, something unexpected happened. However, Stevens noticed the surveillance and backed off at the last second. He glanced up, realization washing over his face as he spotted one of my cameras. Hastily, he snatched the package back and retreated, fear evident in his eyes. My frustration grew, knowing he'd slipped away once again. But this footage wasn't worthless. It showed his intentions clearly, and that was valuable in itself. I reviewed the footage, confirming Stevens' intentions without catching him red-handed. The timestamp, his sneaky behavior, everything screamed guilt. Frustrating as it was, the footage added another layer to my evidence pile. It wasn't the smoking gun, but close enough. Determined to protect Charlie, I knew the importance of every tiny victory. Stevens was slipping, and I was closing in, one careful step at a time. Desperate to protect Charlie, I consulted a legal expert on how to proceed. I laid out everything: the pellets, the medical report, the surveillance footage. The lawyer listened carefully, nodding thoughtfully. "You've got a good start, but you need more undeniable evidence or a witness," she advised. While it wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear, it gave me direction. This battle was far from over. The lawyer advised more undeniable evidence or a witness to press charges effectively. "You're building a solid case, but concrete proof is key," she emphasized. Her words resonated as I mulled over my next steps. "Maybe signal the possibility of police involvement," she suggested. This got me thinking. Psychological pressure could break Stevens down. It wasn't my initial plan, but it was worth considering, as cornering him legally was my endgame. Feeling disheartened but not defeated, I decided to ramp up surveillance. My emotions were mixed, but my resolve was firm. I wasn't ready to give Stevens any more chances. Setting up additional cameras around the perimeter of my home, I double-checked every angle. Charlie watched me curiously from his bed, sensing my determination. I knew that catching Stevens in the act was crucial, and I moved forward with renewed focus. I built a stronger case, collecting detailed footage and testimonies from sympathetic neighbors. Each snippet of conversation, every glance exchanged with understanding neighbors, everything went into my growing folder of evidence. I replayed the camera footage from different angles, ensuring nothing was missed. Conversations with Mrs. Parker and Mr. Jones gave me more details about Stevens' odd behavior lately. Piece by piece, the puzzle was coming together. As an added measure, I contacted an animal rights group for support and advice. Speaking with a representative, I detailed the situation, hoping for insight. "We've seen cases like this," she said, offering guidance on pressing charges and gathering evidence. Their support made me feel less alone in this battle. They emphasized documenting every piece of evidence meticulously, affirming I was on the right path. With their advice, I felt more prepared. The pressure began to take its toll on Mr. Stevens, whose behavior became erratic. From my window, I observed him pacing his yard, muttering to himself. His usual stoic demeanor crumbled, revealing a more agitated version of the man. Sometimes he'd stop suddenly, glaring at my house, as if sensing my determination. The neighborhood's cold treatment was getting to him. He was no longer the composed man who'd scoff at my accusations. He started yelling accusations at me whenever we passed by, further alienating himself from the community. "Got something to hide?" he'd shout, his angry voice carrying through the air. Neighbors turned their backs, unwilling to engage with his outbursts. Each outburst only fueled my commitment to see justice done for Charlie. My interactions with Stevens became brief and tense, his frustration contrasting sharply with my determined silence. The final straw came when Stevens was caught on camera tossing something over the fence. Reviewing the footage, I saw his familiar figure sneaking to the property line late at night. He looked around nervously before hurling a small object into my yard. A sense of grim satisfaction washed over me. This was the evidence I'd been hoping for. Charlie stayed inside, safe as I prepared for the next steps. I retrieved the item, more of the toxic green pellets. Wearing gloves, I carefully collected them, ensuring I didn't contaminate any evidence. The distinct smell and texture confirmed my fears instantly. This wasn't a random act. It was another deliberate attempt to harm Charlie. I photographed the scene, capturing Stevens's act. Back inside, I stored the pellets safely. This time, Stevens's intentions were clear. There was no denying it now. Confident that this was sufficient evidence, I prepared to confront Stevens one last time, this time with backup. Calling Lisa, I explained the situation briefly. "I need you with me when I face him," I said. She agreed immediately, offering to bring a couple of mutual friends as additional support. This confrontation would be different. Armed with irrefutable proof and the support of friends, I was ready to see this through. I showed the new evidence to the lawyer, confirming we'd built a solid case. The footage, the pellets, the vet's report, all laid out meticulously. "This is undeniable," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "We can proceed with pressing charges." Relief mingled with anticipation. Finally, Stevens would face consequences for his actions. The lawyer's encouragement bolstered my resolve even more. This fight was nearing its climax, and I felt prepared. With neighbors on my side and undeniable proof in hand, I revisited Mr. Stevens, this time with legal backing. Lisa and our friends stood by my side, their presence a silent support. Knocking on Stevens's door, I felt a calm assurance. He opened it, eyes widening at the group assembled before him. "We need to talk," I said firmly, holding up the evidence. "This time, you're not getting away with it." Cornered and increasingly unstable, Stevens crumbled under the pressure. His once defiant demeanor melted away, replaced by a frantic, almost desperate energy. Neighbors watched as his rants became more erratic, his behavior a clear sign of a man on the brink. The calm, grumpy exterior Stevens once held in place was no more. He muttered to himself, pacing his front yard, clearly tormented by the walls of suspicion and guilt closing in on him. He broke down, admitting to poisoning Charlie as part of a long-standing grudge over the barking. "All right, I did it!" Stevens shouted, tears rolling down his cheeks. The gathered neighbors gasped, some stepping back in shock. "I was tired of that dog always barking," he said, his voice cracking. I just snapped, okay?" The anger and frustration he'd directed at Charlie for so long now seemed to turn inward. Stevens fell to his knees. The confession was caught on camera, ready to be used in a formal complaint if needed. My heart pounded as I realized we had the evidence we needed to make a solid case. Stevens' raw, unfiltered admission was the final piece of the puzzle. I glanced at Lisa, who looked equally stunned but relieved. This wasn't just about Charlie anymore. It was about bringing justice to my neighborhood and making sure no one else ever suffered. The lawyer and I mentioned the threat of police involvement, which psychologically cornered Mr. Stevens. "You understand this isn't just an apology and walk-away scenario," the lawyer said, her tone firm. Stevens's face paled even more. He looked around, eyes wide with panic and realization. "The police will have plenty to say about attempted animal cruelty," she continued. Stevens's shoulders slumped as the weight of his actions fully hit him, knowing that the law was now firmly involved. This tactic led him to go crazy and eventually confess without any actual evidence. Stevens looked around helplessly, his face a portrait of despair. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean for it to go this far," he babbled, desperation seeping into every word. He stumbled back onto his porch, crumbling under the enormity of the situation. The fear of arrest had pushed him to his breaking point, revealing the depth of his guilt and helplessness. Mr. Stevens was taken away, leaving the neighbourhood in a shocked but relieved state. Watching the officers lead him away, neighbours whispered to one another, the tension easing bit by bit. For the first time in months, the air felt lighter, as though a dark cloud had lifted. People gathered in small groups, discussing what had happened. Charlie lay beside me, safe and oblivious to the drama, but my heart was still pounding with leftover adrenaline. With Stevens gone, the atmosphere in the neighbourhood improved dramatically. The tension that had once strangled our street had lifted, replaced by a sense of communal relief. Neighbours who had once kept to themselves now chatted over fences, shared cups of coffee, and watched their pets more freely. The cloud of fear had dissipated, replaced by a renewed sense of community. The neighbourhood felt like a place of peace once again, without the lurking menace of Stevens. Charlie gradually returned to his playful self, and I felt a huge weight lifted off my shoulders. He began wagging his tail more often, chasing his favourite toys, and greeting me with his big, innocent eyes every morning. Each day felt brighter as I watched him bounce back to health. The nightmare was behind us, and looking at Charlie, I knew he felt safe again. The joy in his playful barks and the wag of his tail was a comfort. I received numerous thanks from neighbours who were also concerned about Stevens's behaviour. Mrs. Parker brought over a pie, her way of showing gratitude. Mr. Jones gave a nod and said, "Good job standing up for what's right." Each note of appreciation cemented the feeling that justice had been served. The neighbourhood had come together through the ordeal, and the shared relief was palpable. We'd made it through, stronger and more united than before. Though the ordeal was harrowing, it brought the community closer together, and I was finally at peace knowing Charlie was safe. The scratches, the bruises, and the sleepless nights had all been worth it. The streets echoed with friendly greetings once more, the palpable sense of security restored. Charlie, ever my loyal companion, stayed by my side, his eyes filled with trust. For both of us, peace had finally returned, and our bond was stronger than ever.